So for creating this render, I first selected the mocap data, which had a good amount of movement to motivate the orbit of the planets and the stars. Once selected, I applied this to a simple mannequin model because I wasn't going to be seeing the mesh itself of my character. So the details didn't really matter that much, just the silhouette really. I then created the star field using a simple noise texture plugged into the world shading. I scaled this up and clamped the white values all the way down using a color ramp node until I was left with just the dots to act as stars. I later shifted this node group into a sphere for easier animation control, but I'll come on to that in a moment. There's a simple particle system emitting particles from the normals of the character, which is honestly just a lot of trial and error until you get them going where you want them to. And the rocky ground is just a displaced plane with a noise texture and a basic procedural rock material, again using a combination of noise textures. Now the particles alone weren't giving me enough of the silhouette I wanted, so I made the character's shader the same way as the world's shader, again using, you guessed it, a noise texture, just clamped to leave the stars, which are plugged into an emission shader. Then to animate the universe, I parented lots of spheres acting as placeholder planets to an empty that I could place between the character's arms to control the movement. This again was a bit of trial and error. I wanted it to look chaotic, but not too much that you can't really make out the planets and nebulas and stars and stuff. The motion blur definitely helps make the chaos look a little bit more deliberate, I think, but this is why I had to move the stars onto a sphere object rather than the world space, as transforming the world doesn't seem to support motion blur. I added some simple rings around a couple planets just using a thin volume shader. I created the nebula in the background using, yet again, more noise textures. These were plugged into an emission shader to give them some glow, but not enough to actually start influencing the lighting of the scene. Then I went through and actually created unique shaders for each planet, more noise textures of course, a mixture of colours and atmosphere types for a bit more visual interest. I created the atmosphere on the edges of the planets just using a Fresnel shader, which was mixed with a diffuse shader, which gives a pretty passable result. It's not quite as good as if I was to actually be using volumetrics just over the surface of the planets. But that would probably be overkill for a scene like this. You can hardly really tell at the distance and the speed they're moving. And then by this point I was pretty much happy with the render. I just did a few more tweaks to the speed of the background animation to keep it from being a bit too overwhelming. I then added a few more particles bursting toward the camera for a bit more depth. I also added some asteroids among the planets to add more interest and detail. And then just a little bit of simple compositing, adding some glow, chromatic aberration, lens flares, and a little bit of basic color correction, mainly to just boost the saturation and the contrast. It's a little bit crazy when I step back and look at just how useful all these noise textures are. They're very powerful nodes, and I'm really happy with how the render turned out. I hope you enjoyed this little breakdown of it. Consider checking out some of my short films on this channel, and if you like what you see, consider subscribing, because I've got a CGI animated film coming up soon called Welcome to Mars, and I'm going to be posting more regular videos about the creation of that film in the coming weeks and months. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.